Hi everyone, Colin Plume. Welcome to Self-Made Millionaire Tips, and excited to have my friend and old business partner. We used to work together many years ago in commercial real estate, Warren Berzack. And Warren, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. President and CEO of Berzack Investment Property Advisors. And just kind of go through a little bit about Warren. He's been in commercial real estate for over 20 years. Over $2 billion in sales in multifamily, retail, land, over 500 transactions in 28 states. So obviously a lot of experience in this space. Was ranked the #1 multifamily agent by Lee & Associates in 2018, and he was the #1 broker for them in 2018 also. And named top 50 agents under 40, even though he's over 40 now, just barely over 40. So that's, it's a little bit higher than that. And then just, the one, you've done a lot of transactions, Warren, but this transaction even impressed me. You had a portfolio in 2019, how many units? 506. 506 units. Sold for $178 million. And was that the biggest sale in California that year?
It was definitely top 5.
Top 5 in California. So that's obviously very impressive resume, to say the least. So, Warren, tell us a little bit how you got started in real estate, and maybe give us a little insight or tip, for people that don't know, should I do commercial? Should I do residential? Give me some insight how you started and why you decided to go into commercial real estate as opposed to other areas.
Sure. So I graduated from Santa Barbara in 2001. And prior to graduating, I tried to figure out kind of what I was interested in doing. I was going to go to law school, decided law school wasn't the path I wanted to take. So started kind of researching different businesses that I was interested in, and read a few books, one of them being Robert Kiyosaki's Cash Flow Quadrant. Mm-hmm. That as well as a few others. And then had a few friends whose parents were involved with commercial real estate. So I met with some people in the business, read some books about the business, and decided, this is kind of what I'm interested in. I'd love to build kind of a portfolio of properties and live off that income. And so that's what kind of got me interested. And then determining that was one component, but then trying to figure out what I wanted to do within commercial real estate was a different one. So I sent out resumes the week before 9/11.
Okay.
So, yeah, great timing.
Great timing.
And so I had, I think, 4 or 5 different interviews, all different types of real estate, commercial real estate stuff. So I interviewed with the Irvine company to kind of start at the bottom where you do leasing for apartment buildings.
Right.
And the bid said, we'll pay you $18,000 a year and you'll rent apartment buildings. I was like, well, that doesn't sound that appealing having gone to college. I met with a loan broker, also didn't sound that appealing. Had a company in Carlsbad that I interviewed with, actually a position I wanted for a guy that was the CEO to basically be his executive assistant and kind of get exposed to his different parts of his business, and then ultimately within a couple of years probably segue into a different part of his business. And then the second last interview I had was with a gentleman up in San Fernando Valley who owned a brokerage company selling primarily retail and apartment buildings. And he said, look, if you follow my model, and you might have heard the same spiel because that's where we work together.
Yeah.
If you follow my model, it's very simple. Do this many calls, this many meetings, this many listing proposals and presentations, and it'll all translate to closing deals, and you can make 6 figures. Okay, well, that sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Been offered $18,500 to rent apartments, or maybe have the potential to make 100 plus. So I decided, not just for the money, but also because I felt like being a broker, I could learn the business from the inside out, learning from people that own buildings that had done it already. And that's essentially what I've done for 20 years, really just spending a lot of time with clients. The vast majority of them built their portfolios themselves. and some of them inherit them, and then they kind of segue to different types of property or navigate different issues with family members. So I really went into commercial into brokerage to learn the business and to make good chunks of money so that I could ultimately invest and buy properties myself.
Mm-hmm. Which you've done.
Which I've done.
Yeah. And so, I always, commercial real estate it's a different path starting out than, let's say residential. And the thing that I found sort of interesting was the people that you were surrounding yourself with, which was part of the reason that I was sort of drawn to it. Who are you dealing with on a day-to-day basis typically when you're selling? What kind of people are you working with on selling apartment buildings and triple net properties? Who are these people that own these buildings?
So I would say there's two different types. The first are people that this is like exclusively what they do. Mm-hmm. So either they inherited the properties or they had another business and they made money in that and then invested in properties.
Right.
Or people that just kind of do something completely unrelated and just invest passively over time and have a management company kind of run things for them. So those are the two main types. But the vast majority of my clients are people that were kind of 50 plus, had a portfolio of apartments and kind of were getting tired of running buildings and the tenants and toilets that come along with apartment buildings. So kind of from day one, I kind of chose to, and was, with the people that trained us as well, kind of steered in a direction where you're basically helping people get from management intense properties to management free properties. So a large portion of my business over the last 20 years has been segueing from apartments to single tenant, triple net retail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that sort of reminds me of when I started with in commercial real estate. The first year that I started, we met at a networking group, and I was in the insurance business at the time, and we started talking about it, and I was in love with what I was doing, and you sort of told me what you did, and we ended up working together for almost about 6 years. And I remember the year that I started, you had a portfolio. You were 25 years old. I know a lot about this because I always tell people the story about you because I find it pretty fascinating. So you were 25 years old, and when I started, you had listed a family portfolio of, I think, 17 properties, maybe. And the thing that's fascinating about this is that commercial real estate is a business where people stay in it. Once they make it, I think there's the attrition is high. People, they don't make it. But the ones that make it build a reputation, and they sell a lot of the properties, right? Would you say that's sort of like there's a few groups that sort of dominate, and this portfolio, you were competing against Marcus Millichap and all the big name guys, and you beat them at 25 years old. Tell me about how that happened, and then how that process was, because I know you moved them from, and this is an interesting thing for people, you moved them from apartments into triple net, and you sort of convinced them that was a wise move, or maybe they were ready to do it. But talk about that process and why it made sense for that family to make that move.
Sure. So the initial contact was with one of the brothers. There's 3 siblings that own the buildings.
And you cold called them?
That was actually from a postcard.
A postcard?
One of my only postcard to business, kind of.
Like a direct hit.
Yeah.
I mean,
it doesn't happen very often. In my business.
And I will tell you, being, we do a lot of marketing. I always tell people that it's multi-touch, right? The postcards do work, but they probably this is a massive home run that probably doesn't happen that much, where it hits directly like this. So
yeah, so we met at Coffee Bean in Brentwood, and he basically kind of wanted to understand the process, what kind of ideas I had as far as what he could do instead of multifamily.
And what how long had they owned these properties for?
So the parents had bought them. So I sold 2005-ish, probably in the the 70s and 80s. The parents had been buying, their parents were chicken farmers.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. And they had made money over the years and invested in real estate. And so
Sure.
one of the sons was basically running the business.
Right.
And he was kind of tired of the day-to-day.
Management,
Yeah.
apartment management, which is, as you know, we'll talk about this later, is
Yeah.
very labor intensive.
Right. So kind of the shtick was take these multifamily buildings and you can transition into triple net, single tenant, get one rent check a month.
And triple net, for people that don't know. So basically, the idea was moving from these labor-intensive apartment buildings where you have a lot of things that can happen, evictions or the buildings falling apart or whatever it is, to triple net means...
So buying, as an example, a fast food restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
So someone owns the business, typically the operator of the fast food or a franchisee, and then someone owns the property itself. Not in all instances, but the vast majority, someone else owns the building and gets rent from the tenant.
Right. And why does the operator why do they want to do this? Why would they want to sell their real estate?
So generally, there's a lot of equity that a business would have, so in the property. So they can take that equity and generally in certain types of businesses, you can make much higher return in the business itself than you can owning the real estate. So as an example, maybe you own, say, a Jack in the Box, and the land and the building are worth $2 million. Mm-hmm. So Jack in the Box can sell that and take that $2 million and make substantially more on it than, say, you or I going in and buying the property,
right,
and collecting rent from the tenant.
It's an arbitrage kind of play for them, basically.
Yeah, just simply looking at it, say you buy a 5% return, like an investor comes in, spends $2 million to buy a 5% return, they get a $100,000 return.
Right.
Jack in the Box would take that $2 million and they're going to make 10% or 20% or whatever they make on their money that they're investing.
Right.
So they can make multiples of that amount.
Right.
That's why they do it. There are a few tenants like McDonald's. McDonald's is more a real estate company than a burger company.
Right.
Because their real estate portfolio is so large, so they get the depreciation benefits and they get the benefit of the franchisees paying them rent.
Right. Yeah, different model than a lot of the more current fast food or even Walgreens or anything else that's out there. So you meet with one of the brothers at a coffee bean. You start talking, and obviously this is a big decision for them to sell their family. This is all their net worth, right? I'm assuming maybe they have other investments, but it's the majority. What do you think separated you from the competitors? You were competing with how many other people? 3 or 4 teams?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
What do you think separated you at that time that made them choose you as opposed to the other team?
I think in sales, the biggest thing is trust. Mm-hmm. And the gentleman that I met with, the brother that was kind of in charge, he didn't make the decision. He was part of the decision-making process, but he and I had a good rapport, and he trusted me. I think even I was 25 years old,
right?
But I'd been in the business a while. He could tell that I kind of knew what I was doing, and I can take them from A to Z and help guide and navigate the family through that process. And it wasn't just about getting a sale and getting a commission. It was, and they're still clients today. Yeah, and they actually members of the family invest with me in some of my projects.
So. Oh wow, okay.
Is there anything that you do particularly, specifically for you to gain the trust of the client?
A lot of people in sales, I think, want to like shove themselves down your throat as far as, go with us, work with us, we can do this. They just very pushy. I have a much more laid back approach. If you want to do business with me, great. If you don't, that's okay. I've never, even when I was younger and I didn't have money, I was never desperate to kind of chase business that way. I felt like asking the right questions, listening was the biggest thing to develop trust and rapport with people. A lot of people, they just want to talk, and they're not actually listening. So not just sales and real estate, but sales and anything. I think generally, people want to be with people that listen ask good questions. When you're doing a podcast, you're going to work at what questions really engage people and kind of tweak that model as you're developing.
Actually, I don't know that answer. I'm trying to figure that out as we go. I hope this is.
But you develop that over time. And so I think just through my career, not specific to that circumstance, but I think through my career, the biggest thing that has helped me is my listening skills and building that rapport and trust with people. And I think fortunately I do it pretty quickly because of just how I am as a person, how I conduct myself. So I think that's led to a lot of my business. And even today, where most of my business is referral driven, I think people are giving me referrals for the same reasons.
They trust you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's trust. And also you've proven, I know personally, I get emails from you sometimes on stuff at 3 a.m. because I know you're working a lot. I think trust is good, but I think people see the work too.
That's true.
I don't think trust enough. And I will say, being around you for a long time and starting seeing your style, I do think you have a very style it is unique in like real estate in general, because you're right that it tends to be sort of a flashier, kind of in your face, I'm the best, this is why you're going to go with me, and you sort of take an opposite approach. And I think that being so opposite sort of is attractive to people. And then I would say, from working with you for a number of years, being persistent, I think the one thing you're maybe is like even though you're not pushing people, you give yourself opportunities to follow up and you stay in front of people for a long time, which I think is important too.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's a lot of different attributes that lead to success in anything.
Yeah.
I think hard work and perseverance and consistency. I'm also very efficient.
Get things done fast.
Also focus on what's important. A lot of people get bogged down with bullshit that doesn't really matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, like I joke with people I'm close with that I do two or three people's jobs, basically. And I work a lot of hours. So if you multiply that by 2 or 3 people, like I'm working even
it's like 6
exponentially
people.
more. Yeah.
It's like 6 people. Yeah.
So I think all of those things kind of have led to my success.
Yeah. And so when you sold this family's portfolio, explain, so you moved them from labor-intensive apartments, I think they had some retail, into triple net properties, not only for ease of management, but how did their income grow? Was there some advantages there that they were able to take advantage of also?
100%. And this is one of the examples, probably one of the best examples I've had in my career. So when we did the analysis on their portfolio, it was worth 30-something million, and they were basically making 1% on their money.
Okay.
So,
for a lot of work.
Yeah, for a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm sure the brother that was kind of managing took a little bit of a management fee, but still, all the equity, they were only making 1% on
So $30 million in property, and they're making $300,000 a year, right? So that's nothing. Yeah, it's really bad.
So in showing the examples to them, just being very conservative, they could go to 5 or 6%. So they basically, at the end of the day, went from making 300 to close to $2 million.
$2 million
a year, with very little management.
Right. And that obviously sold them. I'm sure that was part of the reason they decided to do it.
One of the big components.
Yeah. And so they sold all these apartments, and they went into, what kind of properties did you put them into? Like
the vast majority were fast food and sit down.
Okay.
Quick service and sit down.
And how do you sort of evaluate those in a quick way? How do you sort of evaluate those triple net deals? What's like maybe 2 or 3 components that make those deals good or bad or something that you would invest into?
So generally we try to stick to corporate deals or very large franchisees.
Okay.
When an economy goes south, the only guys that have access to capital is still the corporate and the larger franchisees. The smaller mom and pops that have 2 locations or 10 locations, they have a tough time getting loans.
Right.
So that's one component. And then also we look at area. Can the area support that business? So if you go and buy a Jack in the Box in Beverly Hills, is it going to be as busy as a Jack in the Box in South LA. So, is the demographic within a certain proximity of the location basically going to support the business?
Right.
That's, there's a lot of different things we look at, but demographics, who's on the lease, how long the term of the lease is,
right.
A variety of different factors.
Yeah. So you just look at the demographics, you look at the store. Sometimes you get store sales, maybe sometimes you don't. You can see, rent to sales ratio, something I know that we've talked about in the past. So this family moves into these properties, big sale, kind of sets you off, maybe partly sets you off for the next, 18, 20 years of your career. And obviously you've done a number of trades since then. Tell us, so obviously we see that you've had this long career, and, I know sometimes people, when they're getting into something, they want to know what are some of the hardest things. What would you say is some of the hardest things about commercial real estate that people should be aware of before they decide to jump in?
First off, it's 100% commission-based generally.
Yeah.
I mean, there are places you can start and kind of get your feet wet and have a position that you're getting paid, something nominal. But generally, if you're going to work at one of the big shops and want to start your own career and work for yourself, it's 100% commission-based. So that's one large component. So it's good to have some sort of savings.
Yeah.
When I started, I had, I think, 20 grand or something saved up from working in college. And I knew I could live basically for a year approximately off that if I didn't make any money. So that's one key component. What else is important?
What about the cold calling?
Yeah, just the business in general. So it depends on what product type you specialize in, but in multifamily, it's really cold calling.
Yeah.
You're going to make 400 or 500 calls a week, and hopefully that leads to meetings and closings and listings and all that stuff. But if you're in retail or industrial or office, it's a lot of door knocking. Mm-hmm. You want to talk to business owners, so you're going and knocking on doors in an office building or in an industrial park or whatever you might be doing. So, I was pretty shy when I was younger. I'm still kind of shy, but more introverted, better listener. Again, why this skill set has been good for me in my career. But I had no idea whether I would do really well at commercial real estate. I didn't really know what I was getting into.
Right.
As far
Which
as
is probably good.
I can pick up the phone and make some calls. I had some experience doing bill collections in college at one of my jobs, so I was comfortable on the phone. But it's definitely you've got to hustle to find business. It doesn't land on your doorstep, especially at the beginning, the first 10 years.
Yeah. So cold calling, you'd say minimum probably at least 10 years you're making 500 calls a week to be successful. Is that pretty safe statement?
Yeah. I mean, some people are lucky and they get referral business towards the beginning, or they lock in with the developer, and then they're getting listings because of that one relationship.
Right.
Like I've seen brokers that but that's all, that's their relationship. They're not expanding to other people necessarily. So there's pros and cons to that, but there's a team in LA that does a lot of 3 to 6 unit buildings, and they all look the exact same. They're all pretty much the same 1 or 2 developers.
Got it.
Before we end this segment,
just
one question. Have you ever turned away a client when you felt like with a lot of money and you still said no?
Yeah. So
why?
So the first 10 years, it's difficult because you don't know what you're getting yourself into. There was clients I probably should have said no to. And also I didn't have the financial capabilities to say no so much my first 10 years. The second 10 years of the business, 100%. I say no to people all the time.
What would be the basis?
I don't want to work with a person. I can just tell they're going to be a nightmare to work with. I can tell that the deal is just going to have a tremendous amount of brain damage, and back to the efficiency and kind of sniffing out like deals that are actually like high probability brokerage. Those are all components. So if I can do one deal that's going to take me 20 hours and make X.
Sorry first. That was good. I don't know why I had to interrupt that.
Or if I can choose another deal that's going to take 100 hours to make the same X commission, I'm going to steer myself towards the less brain damage. It's just kind of an experience thing. I talk to brokers all the time that have been in the business longer. And one of the best things about having some financial independence and success in this business or any business is the ability to say no, for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I do it all the time.
I mean, your time is important.
Oh,
So
yeah, absolutely.
you're not going to, and I think part of it in this market, the market's obviously shifted. You can't just list a property and sell it. Like, the early days, it was easier, right? It was much easier with interest rates. So probably more now than ever, you're probably being more picky, I would assume.
Yeah. I remember in 2008 when the market changed, I wasn't financially independent. I was trying to hustle a lot to find new business, calling banks, and spent a ton of time trying to get bank listings, which ultimately ended up being a waste of time. But I was trying to reinvent and figure out how to keep making money in brokerage when there was a lot less volume, deal flow was just a lot more difficult to come by. And so this cycle, I have the financial independence. Whether I work or not doesn't make a difference to me personally. So I'm much more selective on what I want to spend my time and picking deals that are actually capable of closing. Because you could spend a lot of time in a market like today, which is kind of frozen to some degree because of financing, kind of like chasing your tail around, trying to find deals. I have 20 listings. Are any of them actually going to close?
Right.
Maybe one or two. So I'm spending my time focusing more on the one or two than chasing to have 10 or 20 listings.
More realistic
sitting around.
sellers that understand the market and the rates is a better proposition for your time right now, is what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, there's a variety of reasons. Either they need to sell now, or their loan's coming due, so they need to sell, or they have a divorce or a death in the family, or whatever the kind of standard reasons are. People go to sell property, but they have to be motivated.
Sure.
To work on anything today where the seller has no motivation is fool's errand.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting industry. I think. Would you? And then I'll ask my final question for this. Would you recommend? What kind of person do you think will do well in this business? Because one thing I found when I transitioned out of commercial real estate and got into precious metals is, the turnaround for getting paid is so much quicker. Tell us about commercial real estate and sort of the, grit and deals take time, maybe a little bit of that, and then we'll transition into my last question. It takes a while to close deals. It's not fast.
Yeah, 100%. So generally, commercial real estate, you're putting out fires. So every deal has some sort of issue that you're trying to resolve. Nothing is straightforward. There's always something.
Right.
So the more experience you have, obviously that helps kind of navigate future issues that you have. As far as what it takes and what to get into the business now, I mean, you really need to be interested in it. To just go into it because you can make big money is not chasing the right dream. I got into it because I was interested in learning more about investing in property and building a portfolio ultimately. And so that was my motivation. I could make good money, but I was learning the business, like I said a while ago. So that's one key component. Pick something that you're actually interested in. Don't chase it just because of the money. It's helpful if you have some work experience, just because I think you develop a skill set to work with people and deal with people other than just being in school. Mm-hmm. So coming out of school at 22 and jumping right into it can be more difficult. There's people that do it, but it's also good to have some work experience. Like last week I interviewed a young lady who worked on Wall Street. She's been there for 4 or 5 years, and she's interested in coming into commercial. Her family owns apartment buildings, and she's not sure that she wants to do apartments. She might want to do industrial. But she had some work experience and came back to real estate because it was in her blood.
She likes it.
And she likes it.
Yeah.
She's been helping her parents manage their building, so she has some exposure to that as well. But she didn't like Wall Street. Mm-hmm. So she got a taste of something first and decided, you can make plenty of money on Wall Street as well, but it just wasn't the path she wanted.
Right.
She wanted to be in California. She wanted to not be in that environment, or I don't even know what reason
And
she had.
she has a love for real estate, and more than money, it takes someone that has that. You got to be interested in the business because it is hard. It's not an easy business. Escrows can be, I mean, we had an escrow deal we closed. It was an escrow for over a year.
I'm about to close a deal in the next few weeks. It's been in escrow for 4 years.
4 years.
So yeah, the life cycle of a transaction can take a long time.
Wow.
I've had a couple of transactions that are over a year, but generally it's 60 days, 90 days.
Yeah.
And that's once you're in escrow. That's
And
assuming
it can take a long time to get into escrow too.
Yeah, and that's assuming that escrow closes. You might have to go through that. They cancel, then you open
Sure.
a new escrow, and it can happen.
Sure.
A couple.
That must be a record, 4 years.
4 years is
It's up there.
it's quite a deal.
It's a long
Yeah.
time, yeah.
Check with the Guinness Book.
Well, thanks, Warren. In the next one, I do want to get into, I appreciate everything we talked about. And in the next one, we're going to get into syndication, which a lot of people have questions on. People ask me all the time about it, sort of how that works. You'll tell us maybe about some of your early deals in syndication and why someone might want to consider investing. You know, people see these syndicators out there. There's a Grant Cardone and these big syndicators. And maybe we can talk about that, what they're doing, what you're doing, but I appreciate you coming on, and exciting, and I'm sure I'm going to get a million questions after this. And if anybody's looking for you, they can go to your website,
BerzackAdvisors.com.
BerzackAdvisors.com, or if they send us a note here, we can get you in contact with Warren.
And it should be on your screen right now for
Okay.
those that are watching on YouTube.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.